Hello, everybody. Welcome to the pre-show. It's me and Stacey tonight. Stacey, you're muted. We're just waiting for our guest to connect. He's having a little bit of trouble authenticating on StreamYard, so I had to call him there, and hopefully he's able to figure it out. So I seem to walk him through. He just has to remember his password. So while we wait for him, this pre-show might be just a little bit longer, and. But we'll go from there. Cece, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Pretty good over here. It's a cold day.
Cold day. Yeah, I haven't shoveled anything yet. We're still snowed in.
Oh.
It was a very eventful day for me. I spent a lot of time on social media, more time than I normally do, but I had planned for it, and it was a good day of conversing with people. I recently have disturbed a bee's nest, and I'm just waiting for all the bees to go back to the nest and then go back to normal. So, tonight's theme, I guess, for conversation is healing, psychic, and what was the other one? Counseling, right? So, any thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts. I hope I won't be doing too many super chats today. We'll see what kind of position our guest takes. But I always have an interest in anyone who says, they're channeling, any being. And I just like to learn more about how they perceive it and how their psychic senses work. I think that's always interesting for me anyways. They have a interesting novel out too.
He does, yeah, a book, right? The Perfect Predator, I think I have here.
Yeah, it seems like it's a fiction, kind of mystery thriller, which that sounds fun.
I actually maybe I can pull it up. Let's talk about him until he gets here. He's still having trouble, so I don't know what's going on there, but so for those of you guys tuning in, we're just waiting for a guest to figure out his stuff here. But I guess we can talk about him. What do we see here? So I think he has a book on Amazon, right? Is it Amazon?
Yeah, The Perfect Predator: A Scientist's Race to Save Her Husband from a Deadly Superbug, a memoir.
This one here?
Well, I got the link in the bio. I can't see.
Scientist's Husband Superbug?
The Perfect Predator. There it is, right there, the top one.
The one that I clicked on?
Yeah.
Okay. I just don't see his name.
Yeah.
So, because he was featured and quoted 24 times in this book. That's why.
Oh.
That's what it says here. Ah, okay. All right. So he does have a YouTube channel or a podcast. Maybe we can look into that. Get everyone hyped. I don't see him messaging me. I might have to call him back. See what's going on here.
Okay.
What we got here? My side of the crystal. So, any members in here? Anybody in the chat? If you guys have any questions, we can talk to you. It's gonna be a show for all you people.
Show must go on.
The show must go on. So yeah, this is here he is here. So a podcast by Robert Lindsay Milne. And hey Lisa, hey Wes, good to see you. Hey Dave, good to see you too. You guys got any questions in general? Just throw them in there. Let's have a conversation. We'll make use of the time until we can figure our guest out here. So here's his YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
Secret behind. So he's got a podcast, playlists, community. So his we'll just read that here. So My Side of the Crystal Ball is a podcast hosted by Canadian psychic Robert Lindsay Milne. The goal of starting the show is to combine old wisdom with new perspectives. We hope to create a space where people can let their curiosity run wild while giving an opportunity to connect to like-minded people. The format of the podcast will give a chance for Robert to teach with what would Robert say segment, and then an opportunity to learn with the experts chair segment. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I wonder if they do like light language, like that's kind of giving off vibes like that. Light language healing sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of that?
Light healing or light language healing?
Yeah,
I have. I have not experienced it.
me either.
I'm just trying to see there. So we'll just keep that up and talk. I'm going to check the. Yeah, I don't see him emailing me. So if I can get you guys started on a question, and maybe Cece, you could filter that, and then I can give him a call. See if he's having some trouble here. I don't know. Maybe I'll just call him while we're live on the air. I don't know what to do here. Just give me a second.
Hello, Lisa. Hello, Wes. Hello, Dave.
Okay, so he's coming. He was just in a little bit of a panic mode because he's just trying to figure out why everything was happening to him. So it's new because it's StreamYard. We give the instructions with StreamYard on the advice and stuff, and sometimes people don't have Chrome, and then they have to get Chrome and then update it, and then on all these other things. So that's what's going on right now. But he is coming. So okay, well, I don't know what else what to talk about. So let's talk about, I guess, crystal balls in general. What do you think about crystal balls?
Yeah, it's a divination tool some people can use. Like I think you enter into a trance-like state in order to access any like it was or who has it now. But I've never used one or tried one myself.
Priscilla has a crystal ball. She has a couple of them. I've never actually seen her like use them other than like the channel energy from the crystal itself. But like, can you see in them when you look through them? What do you think?
I think some people can. I think you could do the same with water, and it's there's very similar things all over the place. It's just really a way to focus your mind and to put out your intention.
Okay. Hello, Shay May or Sheila May. Sheila May, hello, welcome. We're just experiencing some technical difficulties. Apologize. We did not have any material prep because normally we're right into the show.
Feel free to ask questions, folks.
Yeah, you're here. You're watching. You're waiting too. What do you want to know? Oh, he's here. Okay. Robert, I can hear you. I can see you. And I'm just going to give you a few seconds to put your earphones in. I see you. Can you hear me? Just nod your head. Let me know you can. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna play the intro to the podcast, and then we're gonna bring you in, and then we'll start this right. All right. Thank you. All right, everybody. We'll see you. We'll see you in a bit.
Tonight we will go deep into the realm of the unknown and question everything as we search for the truth. We will explore the possibility of countless phenomena within the ultra spectrum, and together we will learn that it is all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencers Support Association, and it is a live stream broadcast. If you have a question, send me a super chat or become a YouTube member. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencers Support Association. Take a seat, relax, get ready, and welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Today is Thursday, February 3rd, 2022, and I, Ryan Stacey, am your host this evening. I'm a licensed private investigator, a citizen journalist, and the Director of Investigations for the Experiencer Support Association. Welcome to the channel, and thank you for joining us this evening. Remember to super chat, just click the $sign next to your name, and inside the next to your comics box, into your name in the comment box, and if you're in the observation deck, which I'm looking at right now, we are inside the Experiencer Hall. So go on, just put your comments in there and questions, and I'll look at those. So tonight's theme is psychic counseling and healing, and our guest for season 4, episode 5, is Robert Lindsy. Is it Milne? I hope it's Milne. Milne. Oh, I can't. I'll bring you in here. You can correct me in a minute. All right. Robert is recognized across the continent as one of the most insightful psychic intuitive counselors of his time. He has traveled the world, giving insight with his psychic intuitive sessions to tens of thousands of people. Robert was reading tea leaves before he could English. The Toronto native had humble beginnings as the 19-year-old hippie psychic working at a tea house, but he has since grown to be recognized across the continent as one of the most insightful psychic intuitive counselors of his time. He has been fascinated by. We will be fascinated by his work with a coma patient and how he was able to help cure a very rare disease, as featured in the book The Perfect Predator. So hello, Robert. Put on your tinfoil hat. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I feel I can read you can read just a little bit better than me.
Sorry about that.
So well, I had a panic attack. I just could not log on, but now we have. Thank you.
That's okay. We're here now.
Yes.
So did I pronounce your name right? If I didn't, I apologize.
The very first one, Robert Lindsy Milne, but
okay.
is the way it's said.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, thank you.
Normally we go over that before the show starts, but unfortunately we didn't have that today.
Sorry,
so we had to wing it.
Yeah.
All right. So we usually kick the show off with an icebreaker from Tim the Demon Guy Morrison.
Okay.
And what he does is he kind of sets the tone. And what did he give me today? He sent it to me via email today. Where is it? There it is. So his question is, what would you rather? Would you rather know the date of your death or your cause of death?
Oh, for me personally, are you asking me that personally?
Well, yeah, that's the icebreaker.
Oh, I'd rather know when rather than how.
Mm-hmm.
And if I knew when, I would pretty much be able to figure out how. So
yeah, that's true. That's very
when
true.
It's going to happen is for me.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I say when for me as well, and then figure out how, and then figure out how to prevent that.
I have an icebreaker for you. If
Okay.
you were given $10 million
Okay.
and you get to retire for the rest of your life, or you can take all the knowledge, all the information, all your awareness back and start off again at 10 years old, which one would you take?
I would take it. I would start fresh at 10 years old.
Yep, but you would have everything that you already know now.
Oh,
everything, like
everything
all
I already
your knowledge, everything. But
yeah.
but you go back to age 10 and start your life there.
That's a tough question.
Oh, I'd go back. I'd
go back for sure. And then then destiny would take its place.
Right. Because if I got the $10 million, I'd spend the rest of the time drunk and stoned or something. So I'd rather do it more. Right. So that's what
well, we're trying to raise money for a good cause. So the $10 million could help these experiencers. So it's kind of You know, to treat, you know,
Yep.
it could be used either way. But if I went back,
What could do you think with the knowledge that you have
Yeah.
now starting off, what do you think
Mhm.
you could do? Wow.
yeah. But then again, you got to look into how. Well, I would have to imagine. Am I also going back in time to like when I was 10 in that time
Right
frame?
now to no, right
Or I'm
now
10,
today.
I'm 10, I'm
10
10,
today.
10
And you
today.
start out.
Yeah.
That's
So then I
right.
would then I have to imagine what the world's going to look like 25 years from now.
Except that you've got all this knowledge that would prepare you. You would be exactly like you are now, only 10 years old, starting out. And you would be starting from there at 10.
Yeah.
And have the next, the next.
But then I'd have parents that wouldn't allow me to do anything until I was 18. So I'd be caught on this knowledge for 8 years.
Go for the 10 million then.
Yeah, I don't know. That's okay. All right. No, that's good. I've never been asked an icebreaker on my show, so I like that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I needed time to calm down.
That's okay.
I've been on shows before,
Yeah. Okay. No, it's all good. It's all good. So this is about you. So let's talk about. So where do you want to start? You want to maybe walk me through your life about how you got here?
Yes. Well, on January 17th, it just passed, I celebrated 57 years of being a professional psychic. And I began my career, I was 15 and a half years old. I was living on the streets in downtown Toronto, and I was surviving by my instincts and intuitions. And I knew I was psychic. I didn't have a name for it, but I knew, and I'd been doing these things for a long time. And I heard that if you worked at the Cozy Tea Room in Toronto, now we're talking about 1965, so that was a long time ago. If you worked at the Cozy Tea Room in Toronto doing tea leaf and card readings, which I could never do and have never done. If you did tea leaf and card readings, you worked in the afternoon, you'd get a sandwich, cup of tea, and cookies, and also you'd get paid. And if you worked in the evening, you got a hot dinner and cookies and tea, and you got paid. And on that day, in January, I applied, and the way I got the job was I did a psychic reading for the owner of the tea room. And she hired me that day, and I started working at the tea room, performing psychic readings, and that's how I started. And that day, I got paid at the end of the night, had a hot dinner, and that night I had a place to sleep, and the next day I had a job. And I worked at the Cozy Tea Room till I was about 21, 22 years old. And I worked 5, 6, sometimes 7 days a week. And some days I would see 40 people, some days I'd see 10, but it was that consistency over that time period that, besides learning my skills and developing my skills, surviving on the street, then gave me the opportunity to hone those skills and direct them and control them. And that's where it started.
Okay. That's amazing.
So
how did you know that you were psychic? Like, so that's you kind of skipped the part.
Oh yeah,
how you knew that.
How did I know that? Right.
So you were able to get the job. Like, what's behind the scenes there?
So from the time I was a child, like I suppose I was a child when I was on the street, but when from the time of like 5 years old, I was saying things that would get me into trouble. And I never understood. So one example that I talk about often is I had just come home from lunch from school. So I was in either grade 1 or kindergarten, one of the two. And I said to my mother, Grandma Harris died today. And Grandma Harris actually was my great grandmother. And Grandma Harris lived in England, and I was living in Canada, and I'd only ever seen her once in my whole life. And then I come home from school, and I say, Grandma Harris died today. I was like 5. So my mother got very angry with me for saying bad things. And she probably hit me for that too. If I remember correctly, she did. Now, in those days, time or news traveled slowly. In 1955, 1956, very few people made long distance telephone calls. So it took days or a day for news to travel. Next night at dinner, my sister, myself, my mother, my father were at dinner. My mother said to my dad, Grandma Harris died yesterday. And I thought my dad was going to get angry with my mother and maybe even hit her or something. And to my astonishment, they spoke about it. And I was sitting there thinking, wait a minute, I was talking to them about that yesterday, that I got hit, and they talked about it. So I knew something was going on. And I used to, say things on, Uncle Harold, I didn't have a Uncle Harold, but this did happen. Uncle Harold, that wasn't Aunt Sally. Who was that woman? Well, that one got me hit for sure. So I would say things to people and then I would get into trouble and I didn't understand. And then like a day or two later, what I had said was correct. But I was 9. So I'm a, Torontonian, born in Toronto. And except for when I was touring in my work, I've lived just mostly always here. And when I was 9, my father took me to an NHL Stanley Cup hockey game, and it was with Boston and Toronto, and semifinals. And the game went into overtime. The score was tied 1-1. The series was tied 1-1. And the game goes into overtime. And when the teams come on the ice for the first overtime period, I knew number 17 with Toronto Maple Leafs was going to score. The game hadn't even started. The players were just kind of stretching a little bit. And I knew he was going to score. Gary Eman. It was so strong. Like your cat. It was so strong that it seemed like it had already happened. And I was getting all excited, but the game hadn't started. Anyway, the referee blows the whistle, lights gets turned down. This is in Maple Leaf Gardens, and there's like 18,000 people waiting for the game to start. The whole building's quiet, the lights are down, and they're just about to drop the puck. And I couldn't hold my feelings in anymore. In this silent building, I jumped up and started screaming and cheering for Gary Eman because he scored the overtime goal. Except the game hadn't started and he wasn't even on the ice. And everybody in the building turned and looked at me and my father. And he just said, "Sit down." And I did. And the game started. And I was confused as to what had gone on. Anyway, a couple of minutes later, Eman jumps over the boards. I think a guy named Red Kelly did it, passed the puck to Eman. He tips it in the net, and the entire building went crazy. And I remember sitting down watching while everybody was going crazy. I was watching everybody going crazy, and I was thinking, people think differently than me. I see things differently. And that's when I knew why I'd been getting into all kinds of trouble. And that's when I knew what I was going to do in my life. I didn't know how to describe it or what to call it, but I knew that's what I would be doing. So, and I have, so I was 9 when that happened.
9 when that happened. So you realized that, you had some ability, some gift of some sort.
Absolutely. Well, I just knew I was different. And now remember, we're talking about a 9-year-old, and I'm remembering that story as a 9-year-old, and I'm 72 now. So it wasn't quite as sophisticated as I'm describing it this evening.
So how do you imagine it? Like, 5 years old is when you remember your earliest time. So do you think you always had it at 5? Like, were you born with it, or did something happen?
I'm not sure if anything happened other than I came from a very physically abusive and emotionally abusive background. And since I've been doing my podcast and interviewing other psychics, I've noticed that there's a trend with people that do this work often have really intense and traumatic backgrounds, and we've gone through a lot of stuff like that. I've noticed that.
Okay. Can anyone be psychic?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, all right. No, actually, not everybody. Almost everybody can be psychic. And if you think about almost everybody, so if you take a bell-shaped curve And at one end of the spectrum, there is one person that is absolutely zero in awareness. And at the other end of the bell-shaped curve, there's another person that's absolutely 100% aware. And then the rest of us fit in between. So almost everybody is psychic. Being psychic is a natural, normal phenomenon that mammals have. Actually, most living beings have a sense of an awareness, but we mammals are intuitive, and we humans have an instinct about us that caused us to get out of to survive and get past the caveman era. Have you ever been somewhere and you're just sitting around minding your own business, maybe having a coffee and reading the newspaper, and you look up and there's somebody looking at you, and not necessarily staring you down or, but just looking at you, and then you look up and you see them? Or you haven't talked to a friend in a bunch of years, and then all of a sudden you start thinking about the person, and then you hear from them, or things like that. Now, almost everybody can do that.
I can relate to like driving, and then all of a sudden I just feel something, I turn and look, and then there's like someone in another vehicle looking at me, and then they look away.
Absolutely.
Like that's happened so many times. And
Absolutely.
I was just like it's just so weird that I felt the eyes, and then
Absolutely. So being psychic, and you just even look at the root, the root of the word. Psychic comes from psyche, the Greek root psyche, which means mind, soul, or self. If you have a mind, you have a soul, and you have a self, and you use it, you're psychic. And that's basically what it takes to be psychic. There are certain groups where their brain chemistry and how their brain formed, they may not be able to understand behavior or emotions, or some people on the autism scale may not be able to use skills like that or have skills like that, but almost every one of us has. And it's for our protection. And we also have a tendency to remember our worst case scenarios too.
I understand that. So I'm just looking here. I made some questions. I was just thinking, in terms of, like, are you religious at all? Like, how does this apply to? Were you brought up in any faith at all?
No. The family that I was brought up in, wasn't particularly religious or spiritual. Okay. So now there's a difference between being spiritual and there's a difference between being religious. Okay. And I think that it's also worthwhile to, when you think about being spiritual, we always assume, well, not always, but most of the time when someone says, "Oh, I'm a spiritual person," or "this being is a spiritual person," what we're saying is, this is a good person. This person's good. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that. So being spiritual doesn't necessarily mean being good. It's we think that is, but in our universe, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. In our universe, there must be positive, there must be negative. It cannot exist if it isn't there. So what we are is positive and negative. So there are positive energies or spirits, spirituality, and then there are negative spirits or spiritual people. So if you think of Anton LaVey, Anton LaVey wrote the book, I believe it was called the Satanic Bible. He wrote that. And he also started the Satanic Church of California. So he worshiped the devil, and in our way of thinking, he was spiritual, but he wasn't a good spiritual. He wasn't positive. So being spiritual doesn't necessarily mean being good or positive. It can be lots of things. So that's really important to look at or consider. In terms of religion, I didn't have much religion at home. At around 12 or 13, I started going to a Presbyterian church, a Christian church for a while. And then when I left home, when I ran away the first time I was 14, I stopped going to the church. And I didn't particularly believe in it anyway. But I don't walk around saying I'm a spiritual person or I'm this. What I just simply do is be as nice and good, as kind as I can be.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, okay. So you never really identified. You weren't programmed in a certain way, but you always felt this. You naturally felt this.
That's right.
This way, because there is in the Bible and many other faith and religions, like psychic abilities and spiritualism and all that, as we mentioned too. But you gravitated towards that naturally. So how do you think it's possible for someone what makes you different? Were you were born that way, but how come others aren't? What made you so in tuned?
Well, that's good. It's survival. Mm-hmm. It was survival. So everyone has that awareness, and everyone can use it if they want to. It's not a spiritual gift. It has nothing to do with religion. It's simply about the way our mind works and the way we as species survive. And so there's nothing religious or spiritual about it. It's a natural phenomenon that we all have. Now, in my case, I realized that I had a talent or an awareness. It had a lot to do with I was getting a living shit beat out of me a lot of the times. And by the time I was 11 or 12 years old, I had been whipped with skipping ropes, rubber hoses, spatulas, anything that my mother could get her hands on. And I experienced that. I learned to survive by my instincts. Mm-hmm. And then at around 14, the first time after a beating or whatever, I ran away from home. And I spent from November of that year to April. And I the first time I lived in the streets, surviving that way. And then the police caught me and brought me home. And then
So was there any trauma like that before the age of 5? Is that just when you remembered, or how? I'm sorry to hear all that.
I have remembrances of being violated at a really young age.
Okay.
And so I've spent my whole life doing therapy since I was about 16 or 17 up until now. Actually, I just had a therapy session this afternoon, and my therapist said, "Robert, you graduate. You're cured." So really, truly, that's what happened this afternoon. So,
Great.
The question was what again? See if you can just say it again, because
what I was just asking I was curious to know if there was when the trauma had started, because what I'm wondering is if do you think that experiencing that, as horrible as it was, did that perhaps create this ability that you have?
Absolutely.
That may have unlocked it through trauma.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And when I think I mentioned it just earlier on when we first started talking, most of the people that I've met, since I've been doing my podcast, and I've made my I was sort of semi-retired for about 8 years, but I worked, in that time off, I still did 400 or 500 readings a year. So it was, so in my semi-retirement, I still worked quite regularly. Then I came back because of the book that you mentioned about, helping Stephanie find a cure for the superbug. So since I've come back and have been interacting with other psychics, the younger ones and the modern ones, I realize that most of us that do this have had really severe trauma.
Yeah,
part of the job.
I'm finding that too in our experiencer cases too. When people do report we start with their baseline experience, but then when we get into it and we dig and we try to learn, that seems to be common. But I did often speculate if that affected the brain in some way, that this may be a defense mechanism. And then you mentioned that it's biological and it's a natural behavior of humans. And then now here I'm thinking, okay, then it is a defensive mechanism.
It is. It is, and our unconscious mind and the way it works is they're set up for our survival. And if we, as humans, as a species, didn't have that instinct, we never would have evolved from the caves. But most mammals are like that. Most mammals have that instinct. Dogs, cats, horses. This is really, I don't know how this happened. Dogs, cats, horses, and dolphins have a really close connection with humans, and we can unconsciously communicate with those animals, or those animals can bond with us quite easily. But just about every mammal has this instinct.
Yeah, I can relate it with that. Like you can communicate with animals and know exactly, have that feeling that you know what they mean, and you're communicating with them, but you're not talking the same language. Like,
Ryan, in us as human beings, we have three ways that we communicate. And the three ways that we as human beings communicate are in this order: unconscious nonverbal communication, called body language; tone of voice, so the way we say it; and the words that we use. So those three. Now, unconscious nonverbal communication, body language, is about 75% of what and how we express ourselves. But 75% is unconscious and nonverbal, our body language. 20% of our communication, the way we communicate, is how we say the words, like, "You're a really nice person." Well, wait a minute. No, that didn't sound like you believed it, right?
Yeah.
Because, okay, so, or "I love you a lot." Well, maybe not. So 20% is our tone of voice, and 5% are the words we use. So when you're reading a text or writing, someone's written to you, you're giving up 90%, 95% of your awareness when you look at the words. And you're only getting 5%, which is one of the reasons if you get into an argument with somebody with messenger or texting or emailing, is because you're only using 5% of your awareness. And we always react and see things not as how it is, but how we are. So if we're in a bad mood and we get a text from somebody, we'll interpret it in a miserable way. And if we're in a happy mood, we'll interpret it a different way again. So that's how we communicate. So unconscious nonverbal is 75%.
That's quite fitting. The recent events that I've been going through as well. I've been talking to people on on social, and I totally understand the 5% and the protection behind the keyboard and borders and things like that too. And if we were just face to face,
you wouldn't have made the mistake, most likely.
Yeah, no, I get that. I totally get
that. That's how come. So that's just all part of us as mammals and how we communicate.
So do you? So with your understanding of the psychic ability, you're suggesting that it's a normal human behavior. So would there?
I'm not suggesting that at all, Ryan. I'm saying it is.
Okay.
And
is it at all possible in your mind to have any divine or outside influence, like a spiritual being?
Well, okay. So I didn't say there's no other influence.
Okay.
I just said that being intuitive or being psychic isn't necessarily spiritual. People that lean towards being spiritual often can do this kind of work. but it's not obligatory. You don't have to be spiritual. You don't have to meditate. It's a natural phenomenon. So when I realized that this was going to be my career, and well, I knew it was going to be my career when I started working at the Cozy Tea Room. I was a cocky little kid. I remember telling everybody the day that I started that they would say, I said, one day, you'll be telling people this is where I started. I was a really cocky kid. It's probably the reason I survived. But after 4 years or 5 years of doing readings, and it was, and I was practicing as well. If I wasn't going to work doing readings, I was practicing doing readings. Mm-hmm. And around 21 or 22, when I left the tea room and didn't want to do that anymore, I'd been thinking about what kind of a commitment could I make. And I had heard that if when a young man becomes a priest, he makes a vow to say a mass every day of his life. And I thought that if that's what I'm going to do, if I'm going to dedicate my life, my life to this work, then I'm going to make the same kind of vow. And I decided then that I would do at least one psychic reading or practice being psychic every day of my life. And I made it for more than 30 years before I missed a day of practice or a day of doing readings. It was more than 30 years. And the reason I took that one day off is because I wanted to know what it was like not to focus on being psychic.
And what was that like?
Empty.
Yeah.
There's been a few times in my life where not so much that I lost my psychic ability. It was I just wasn't using it or couldn't, or I got burned out, tired, drained, whatever. And I would walk around thinking, how do these people survive without that awareness? Like, how do they make it? That's been my, my sense when I haven't really been tuned in. So this has been not just making money to have a nice car. This has been what I do for my life purpose. Mm-hmm. And at 72, as I said, I'm still doing 400-500 readings a year, even when I was semi-retired.
So how does a reading work?
Well, for me, I can't speak for anyone else. I don't use a medium per se, like I don't use cards or palm or crystal ball. When somebody comes to me for a reading, you sit down in a pretty nice chair, or we do it on YouTube or on Zoom these days. But when we're open, like when we can visit people and stuff, from my office here, someone comes in. Readings are an hour long. I'm really generous with my time, especially because I'm getting older. And in my career, doing readings, appearing on radio and TV shows around the world, it's calculated that I've done, over my 57 years, I've done more than 100,000 psychic connections. Not our psychic readings, but giving guidance on the phone, on shows. Readings the way that I have all my life is more than 100,000 psychic connections. And so I'm trying to think of why I was saying that. So I decided this was a life commitment, and I've been dedicated, and I'll do this for the rest of my life until I die, or I lose my, I won't be able to speak, or I'll be senile or something, and then I'll stop. But I'll do this forever. Well, I have done it forever.
Well, you've helped a lot of people understand, get clarity. What kind of reading?
Oh, yeah.
Right. What is a reading? What are you reading? So, in a sense.
Well, what happens then is my readings are a monologue rather than a dialogue. In fact, I ask people to please not interrupt me. And in my readings, they're, around an hour long. And I have a, way I start. I start off, and I give the date, my client's name, and then I'll say, psychic reading by Robert Lindsy Milne in Toronto. And then I just simply say, here we are today in February 2022. What I'm about to tell you is, and then I just do a monologue for at least an hour, and I talk to the person about their life. And things that I do these days in a reading, often when I tune in, I see somebody's life from conception to the completion of their existence. And when I say I see the, conception, it's not like I'm, seeing them being formed. I just know when it is. And the same with when they complete their life, I have a really good idea when it is. And I go forward and backward in time several times in everybody's reading. And I talk about where they are, where they're going to, what they can experience, what they will be experiencing, and I get quite detailed. And I spend a lot of time where you are right now, but I do go back and forth, and I look into the past, and I'll talk about different issues that that have happened to them, what they're going through. I measure their patterns, this cycle, and I measure the different cycles. And as I said, I often can see somebody's completing their life. Other techniques that I've used, and once again, I'm having this really amazing experience because I'm just this kind of comeback just a couple of years ago, and I started appearing on podcasts and then my own show. I started realizing that what I do, very few other people do, and in fact, I haven't met anybody that does. So when I'm say, for instance, you came to me for a reading. Let's just say, because it almost always happens, people are going through some difficult time, or, usually, people don't go to a psychic that often because they're happy and they just want to, they come to us because often they're in trouble, or they need help, or they're confused. So when I'm dealing with somebody in the midst of a crisis, I only ask 2 questions at the beginning of the reading. How old are you? What month is your next birthday? And then the rest I talk. And I ask people, please don't interrupt me. Even if you think I've made a mistake, don't interrupt me, because I'm going to be checking what I said, going back and forth, checking what I've said. And if I've made a mistake, I'll correct it myself. And if you interrupt me, you could interrupt the flow of the connection and maybe not get it back. So
is this like channeling? I guess you're
I
channeling.
don't think
from
so.
somewhere?
It's just the way I do it.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like channeling. Like you're drawing from somewhere. You tap in. You tap into something in some state.
I certainly
right?
do. I certainly do. My focus is helping the person in front of me. My purpose is doing it rather than labeling it. That's what my life has been about. Rather than having the fancy words, I just take care of what's in front of me. So what I do now, or one of my techniques, is I will say you're going through a crisis and you're 29 or 40. Let's say you're 40. What I'll do is I'll look into the future to say when you're 80 or 85. Then I'll look back through your eyes at 80 or 85 years old, and I'll describe to you today how you feel about the way you solved it when you're 80. And I'll come up with all the details of going on, and I'll show them how they solved it and how they survived it. And so 2 things that happen. One, I tell them, and they find out they're going to live for a fairly. No, I wouldn't do it if they're not 80 years old. I wouldn't do that. But just using that concept, what they find out is that they got 80 more years, and most importantly, they get through what they've gone through. They're going through right now, and that's often the way I do it. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll look back in the past and I'll see something that had happened, and I will talk to them from how they feel it on the inside, and show them. Another technique I thought everybody did, when I have bad news to give, and you have there is bad news. And while I don't like to give bad news, I'd rather make everybody happy and have a beautiful life. And I don't want to give bad news. Sometimes you do have to. And in a lot of my spiritual or inner beliefs, I believe that almost everything, when you can see something, when you know something's going to happen, then you can change it. So if you know an event is going to occur, you can prepare for it. If you don't know, and you just tell somebody, you're going to be happy and blah, 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 then you're doing them a disservice, because if you're not warning them or preparing them, then you're not doing your job right. So the way I do it is I talk about the extremely positive results of the shitty time they're going through right now. And I talk about the positive side, or I talk about the benefits of what's going to happen to them. And then I come back to the present and I just give them a little hint. And I change the subject and talk about other things. And then I come back and then give a bigger hint and a bigger hint. And then I refer to the really positive event that's going to be happening as a result of what we go through. And then finally, they slowly realize there's something going on. And then I identify it for them. And that way they don't panic. That way they'll see that it can be changed or be in control.
Yeah, you're giving them, you're leading them to hope too. So
Absolutely.
you acknowledge, yeah, and that's nice. There's bedside manner there.
So that's how I do it.
So
it's a skill. I challenge anybody to do that.
How do you identify? So you're pulling information. You don't know where it's coming from. Is there contact when you're working?
I touch them or anything? No.
Yeah, nothing.
No.
So how are you able? Well, I'm just saying, if you touch them, then you might be able to draw in specifically their life. So how do you, when you're, I would say channeling, because you're tapping in to some sort of source to get this information from, how are you able to discern or be absolutely certain that the information you're reading is the person in front of you?
Because that's who I'm tuning into.
Okay. But are there markers that you see and feel to give you a hint that you're reading the right person?
If somebody says to me, "Oh, I saw you talking on a podcast last night. Who was it? Oh, that's Ryan Stacey." Well, how do you know? Well, because I could see him. That's why. That's how come I know you're Brian. You know that you're Ryan Stacey. Well, where did I get that from? Am I channeling it? Well, I just know.
Because you were there.
Yeah, because I'm there. That's right.
So you go there. So you're going there. So you're mentally seeing it in real time. Wow.
I don't see it. The thoughts, the feeling, the ideas come to me.
Okay.
And when I'm doing a reading, I ask people not to interrupt me, because a lot of times what I'm saying isn't what I'm thinking. What I'm saying has already been processed, and what I'm thinking about is what I'm going to be saying next. So and over the years, other things. Now at this point, when I'm doing a reading, I am thinking about what I've said, what I'm about to say, what I have said previously. And then sometimes at the same time, I'll be thinking about what I'm going to do after the reading's over. And it's like having 4 TV screens on the wall, and each one playing a different channel, and they're going on at the same time, and I'm looking back and forth. And then if something comes up that in this moment, then they have my right there. So I'm in a semi altered state, but I'm consciously aware of what's happening.
Interesting. Okay, so we're gonna pause here 'cause we're gonna
Okay.
take a commercial break. It's only a 5-minute break. So when we come back, I want to get into I want to talk about Stephanie and Thomas, those two doctors that you helped, because I'm very
Yes.
fascinated into that.
Amazing story.
So yeah, what was it too? Because it's that superbug. So I'm really curious to know how that's all connected. I want to dive into
Okay.
that. So thank you everyone for who is watching. Remember, you are listening to a podcast by the Experiencer Support Association, and we will be right back.
It's your business. It's your property. Your assets are worth protecting. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services specializes in patrolling and inspecting residential or commercial property against fire, theft, vandalism, terrorism, and illegal activity. People and buildings are monitored to prevent crime. Keep your property, your people, and your assets safe from threat. Our elite staff are dual licensed private investigators and security guards. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services. Go to blacklightiss.com.
The same thing that draws aliens to our planet is the same thing that draws us to others. Exploration, curiosity, sustainability of life. That's why we go. It would make sense as to why they're visiting here.
Travis! Quit playing around, man. Get back here. Travis!
The last thing I remember was this numbing shock. Stunning sort of a feeling. Very powerful.
Get away from me!
I was just out of my mind with fear, just screaming the whole time.
It's been theorized that aliens prefer remote areas because they don't want to attract attention. Whatever it is that they're doing, they would want to do that in a less populated area. There are multiple accounts of the same thing from people from all over the world. People that do not know each other, do not live in the same cultures, and they're all looking up, they're all seeing things in the sky. So it would be naive of us to think that we're
Ryan is one of Canada's leading new UFO investigators. He conducts and oversees UFO investigations on a constant basis and was really taken by his research. He's compiled a tremendous amount of data regarding UFOs in Canada. Just as interesting, he really goes over how UFO investigations are done and what are some of the mistakes that people make when they submit evidence. Note for starters, don't edit your videos or photos before you send them. If you want to hear more follow-up conversation between Ryan and myself, you can go to richardolanmembers.com, where we have a candid conversation on ufology, the paranormal, and more. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth, let's be good to each other.
Welcome to the Observation Deck, a state-of-the-art, one-of-a-kind virtual platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus, just like you would in real life. First, you install the application and design your very own unique avatar. Then you're free to explore the various areas of the campus at any time from anywhere. There's so many areas and activities to choose from on the platform. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, a large expo hall, a movie theater, a nightclub, an art gallery, and even a beach. Come attend a conference, or take a class, or hear a lecture. Meet new friends and interact directly with presenters. It's all right here on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Where in the world will you go?
Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? You know, people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today by going to tesacan.org/EA. That's TESACAN.org/EA. Welcome back. You are still listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Did you know that we have a private community chat for members on our YouTube channel? If you become a member, you will get bonus content like exclusive videos, including bloopers, behind the scenes, and members for only Q&A. We also do members meetings as well. If you've ever experienced an unexplained event involving paranormal, UFO, extraterrestrials, dogman, or any other paracryptid, you can head over to tesacan.org/reporting system. Let others who have already reported be that example that proves we are making a difference. And if it wasn't for you, we would not be able to do what we do. And for that, we thank you. And I'm still here with Robert. And how are you doing? Hope you're not coming in there. Are you muted?
Okay, so did I hear that you're Canadian?
That's correct.
Whereabouts are I'm from Toronto. I live in Toronto.
I've been wearing this Canadian hat this entire time. You did not see that?
I don't have my glasses on. Now I see it. Okay, I didn't have my glasses on.
Yeah, I'm in Ontario.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm in Ontario. Northern Ontario.
Wow.
Yeah, north of Barrie.
Barrie, in all my years of touring, appearing on radio shows and TV shows, the most successful, when I say dollar for dollar, like the most successful place to go to was Barrie, Ontario, because when I was younger, I'd have this whole tour booked, but I wouldn't have the money to get to the first city, so I'd drive up to Barrie and I'd be on CKBB, and I would do a 1 hour show there, but I'd just drive up in the morning. And I would check into the Bayshore Motel, just right on Lake Simcoe, and go to the station, do the show, go like crazy back to the radio station or the motel, answer the phone, book about 10, 12 readings and do them that evening, the next day, next morning, and then drive back home, and I have my front money for the next city. And that's how I used to start in those days to get around.
That's good though. You grinded. You did what you had to do, helping people along the way. And I mean, that's good. That's good.
I appeared on 103 radio stations from coast to coast, east to west, and north to south, as far north as Yellowknife and Whitehorse, and as far east as St. John's, Newfoundland, and so I've been in all the provinces and territories and met all the Canadians.
Didn't mean me.
I haven't, but you weren't. You might not have been born when I was doing that.
Maybe that's possible.
So
that's possible.
Yeah,
that is. I'll take that. That's valid.
By the way, I was the very first performing psychic in Canada. I was the one. I was the first one. And I was the first one that was doing phone-ins as well. When I was learning about being psychic, it was never, ever imagined that you could do readings on the telephone. It just was not ever thought possible.
You know what's interesting about this Canadian thing is when I got started in doing all the stuff that I do, it took me having to project into an American market. Yes. To eventually get reconnected with other Canadians in the American market. It's just so strange that marketing here at home, we don't connect, but yet we find each other.
For some reason, we Canadians just don't treat our talent in the most positive way. And you can be really good here in Canada and they say, oh yeah, great. And then you go down to the States or somewhere else in the world and everybody thinks you're absolutely amazing. But back home they say, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, I see him around every now and again. Yeah, sure. And that's the way Canadians treat their talent. So you have to go away somewhere to be really successful. Then you come back and they say, oh, well, you did pretty good. That's kind of like the way it is here.
Yeah, no, I relate to that. I'm recently encountered with a bunch of Americans, so I'm taking a break from that. I like it. It's safe here.
Yes, well, our American cousins do have a different way of expressing their ideas and values, and just different than ours. You know, one of the reasons I think America is different. Oh, actually, most of North and South America is different, because up until just a few years ago, we were the only nation that negotiated our separation from the homeland. And every other country in North America, South America, and Central America, except us, got their independence by revolution and war.
Yeah, they took it by force.
And we negotiated it. And there's a different mentality there.
And that's what I find too, because like when I'm trying to diffuse, American issues, I forget, and I'm trying to provide, this Canadian peacekeeping, which is what we're known for.
Sure.
But it's also not something they're familiar with, because they're only familiar with war.
And winning.
And they lose.
So I just have to also say that as a Canadian, I'm a bit older than you. As a Canadian, what I've seen throughout my life, we live the life that we have because of the security that country provides us, and nobody would dare invade Canada because the Americans would not tolerate it. Because they're great guys, but the other reason is because they don't want that crap on their border. So so we owe our peace, our way of living to our cousins to the south.
We do have a lot of American listeners too, and some of you guys are in the chat. So I just no offense, we're just having a good old Canadian conversation here.
Oh, I sounded pretty good the way I said it, but you can.
Well, no, just recently I've been pretty hard on some people. So
sure.
But I mean, it's all about healing. So the other part, so there's counseling and then there's healing too, right? So this is the psychic part.
Yes.
So then, tell me more about this, and then we'll get into that book.
Okay, so a lot of my work is emotional healing rather than physical, although I've been doing some physical healing. The way I do it's quite unique, or different anyway. So my work is helping that person that's in front of me. I'm not that interested in what goes on in the rest of the world, although I'm pretty informed. I'm not smart enough to understand what goes on in the rest of the world. I can't end world hunger. I can't make world peace. What I can do is help the wounded person in front of me. I can feed the hungry person, and I do. I go back to the neighborhoods that I lived in, when I lived on the streets, and I go back and give money to the kids on the streets. Still, I can feed the person that's hungry in front of me. I can help that person in front of me. I can't change the world, but I can help that person. So that's what I'm really focused on.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, I understand that. Okay. So, so you mentioned that book. So Dr. Stephen Strathty and Dr.
Stephanie Strathty.
Pardon me, Stephanie.
And by the way, she's one of ours.
And Dr. Thomas Patrick. She's Canadian?
Oh, yeah, Toronto. Oh. And I first met Stephanie.
Okay.
And she had just finished her doctorate degree in epidemiology. It was like 30 years ago.
Okay.
Stephanie now is a professor of epidemiology at the University of Southern California, as well as associate dean of the epidemiology department at the university. And her husband, Tom, is a professor of experimental psychology and is a professor of psychiatry at the same university. And he also is associate dean of the experimental psychology department. So these two people are heavyweights. There's a difference in age. Tom is older than Stephanie, and it's both their second marriages. And Stephanie has been my client for a long time, and her husband Tom has had readings from me before in the past, and he knew about me through Stephanie. So they were going, and just one other thing, Tom reminded me of an Indiana Jones kind of guy. He's a rugged guy. He's about 6'6", 6'5". He's a big rugged guy, macho. He's a man's man. And one time he got captured. He was on a research mission, and he got captured by the Sandinistas, and he was in a prison camp, and he just about starved to death at one time. So he's done all these amazing things that a man's man would do. Tom ballooned up to over 300 pounds, though, and he got really big. A year before the incident that happened, I was doing a psychic reading for Tom, and this is what I said. It's in the book, by the way. This is what I said. I said to him, by 2000 and I think I said 17 or whatever. By it was 3 years into the future, you're going to be 100 pounds lighter than what you are now. That's what I see. It's like 3 years from now, you will have lost 100 pounds. Then I talked about other things, and then I came back to it, and I said, I also see a serious illness happening. And you are going to get so sick, you would not be able to get sicker and still be alive. And I'm thinking, Tom, that because I've seen them in this order, your destiny is more to lose 100 pounds rather than get sick. And I think that if you listen to what I say, and maybe it scares the hell out of you, and you would lose that 100 pounds, or you'll get sick. And it seems to me that you can do it the easy way, or you can do it the hard way. And I deliberately gave that to him that way in the hopes that it would frighten him and he would take action. And he did for a week or so, but then, by the way, when I was a kid, like when I was in my 20s and early 30s, I was over 300 pounds. So I know what it's like to be an addictive eater. Anyway, it scared Tom for a while, and then he went back to his old ways. Tom and Stephanie went away on a dream vacation, and they went to Egypt. And while in Egypt, the illness that I was talking about with Tom in his abdomen, and I talked about it there, it flared up, and he got really sick. They were touring a pyramid. He got really sick and passed out, and they had to carry him out of the pyramid. He got really, really sick, going back to the hotel. And then Stephanie took him to the hospital, and he was admitted. While in the hospital in Egypt, besides whatever was going on in his abdomen, it was something called a pseudocyst, and I had no idea what the hell a pseudocyst is, but it was something serious, and it was attached to his pancreas, I think. Tom also contracted the most potent superbug on the planet, and it was at the time, well, it still is. It was 100% antibiotic resistant, and that meant if you got it, you died. That's what it meant. And Tom got it. He was medevac to Germany.
So this would be the superbug then? This is the
superbug that he caught. That's right. And he was medevac to Germany. He was in total isolation, and his doctors and everybody was, seeing him in hazmat suits and things like that. It was like a really serious deal. There's Stephanie in Germany, and her man is dying. She's an epidemiologist, and she is very well known for her brilliant work in AIDS research around the world. And she's got all these awards. And there, her husband is dying of the superbug. And she called me. She called me. I'll never forget the day. I was feeling really sick. I had the flu or something, and she called me on Skype. And when I sat down and she answered, but this is actually true. I said, you know, what took you so long? I've been waiting for you. And that's also in the book too. And she started to tell me about Tom. And at that moment, what I did is I created a psychic link with Tom. And I knew, and he was still in Germany, I knew what he was going through. When he was unconscious, I knew what his state of mind was. I knew how he was emotionally. I knew when he was strong. I knew when he was giving up. I knew when he was dying, and I knew when he was coming back. And every day I'd have a meeting with Stephanie, and we would talk about what was going on with Tom. And I was describing psychically what I was perceiving in Tom. Stephanie, and during that time, I told Stephanie that she could find a cure, and that I told her that she had experienced everything that she needed to do or to experience to be able to find the cure, and she could do it. And she decided to go on the quest while her husband was dying of the superbug, that to find a cure. And she set out to find this cure. And I was in contact with her and had a meeting with her every day. And during that year, when Tom was sick, as well as with Stephanie, I took care of both of them, making sure that both Tom's needs were getting taken care of and making sure that Stephanie's needs she was taken care of. But it wasn't just between me and Stephanie. And while there were 3 different incidences that if a psychic hadn't have been on the job, Tom would have died, because the doctors would have had no way to know that he was in the crisis. 3 different times. Over the time with Stephanie, I was helping her survive. I was helping her connect with people. And she set up a group of scientists around the world that collaborated in this event, finding a cure for Tom. And Stephanie actually came up with a cure, and she would run everything by me. But remember, I'm not the star of the show. I was a character actor in the movie, as it were. There were other stars that were far greater. You know, the doctors that looked after Tom, Stephanie's work. There were a lot of people that did more. So I understood what Tom was experiencing while in the coma. And there was this one point, again, it's in the book, there was this one point where Tom didn't understand where he was in this coma. He was sick. He could hear people speaking, and he could understand some of the words, but he was unconscious. The way I imagined what Tom's life force was like is I visualized a candle, and a lit candle. And when the candle light was strong, I knew that Tom wasn't going to die today. I knew that. When the candle was flickering, I knew he was in trouble. And there was one time where I woke up in the morning and I saw it when I tuned in, that I saw the candle and it was flickering. It was going to go out. And I spoke to Stephanie right away, and I said, Tom is really going through something really intense right now, and his vital signs are all crazy, and he's letting go, and Tom needs to see his daughters. Yesterday would have been a good day. Today is a good day. Tomorrow's not very good, and if you wait longer, don't bother. And that night, his 2 daughters flew from California, and they arrived in Germany. And I knew they arrived. I knew something had happened because the candle got strong, the flame. And as it turned out, what happened is his 2 daughters showed up, and they put on their hazmat suits, and they went to their dad, and they held his hand, and they did all that. And Tom came back. And he writes about that differently in the book, but he writes about that. So I know that if a psychic, and I'm saying a psychic, not just me, a psychic, if a psychic wasn't involved, we wouldn't be talking tonight. We wouldn't be having this conversation because anyway, he got strong, and over time, then he got medevac to California. And then over that time period, Stephanie came up with 3. The other thing about this is that Stephanie has a memory like Sheldon Cooper. You know, the guy on Big Bang Theory, you know, and now she's not quite as geeky as Sheldon. She's quite sophisticated socially, but she is a bit of a geek. You know, when you're that smart, you're a geek, you know, and when you have that kind of brain. But she has a photogenic memory. And every day when I'd meet with her, she would give me feedback from what I had done the day before and the day before and the day before. And she was constantly giving me the feedback on what I'd been doing, what I'd been saying. Because during that time, I was identifying things more than I'd ever before. But then I started to be a little bit ahead of the doctors. So I would sense a problem in Tom, and then 2 days later or 3 days later, the doctors would pick it up. Or I would know when his vital signs had changed before the doctors knew. And because I'm not particularly literate, I still have trouble reading words today and writing. So I wasn't able to. What I was able to do is to describe to Stephanie what Tom was feeling, and describe the way his organs were looking. I visualized it, and I started, and when I'm relaxed and stuff, I use a lot of colloquialisms, and I use kind of cool ways of unique ways of saying things. And the doctors actually started, like I would be a couple of days ahead of seeing stuff, and the doctors, when they were explaining what was going on to Stephanie, often the doctors would use a similar colloquialism that I had used, mm-hmm. and that's also in the book. So Stephanie was determined to find a cure, and so I just have to tell you a bit more about this. So with one of the things that I've been petrified of my whole life, and still even today, is messing around with these kind of medical things and killing somebody or hurting somebody. I've been petrified of that. I've walked the floor at nights, and not just health things. I've walked the floor at nights worrying about, some guidance that I've given somebody that it could be wrong, or, fortunately most times is not. Every day, Stephanie gave me a recap of what I had done previously the day before. And I was astonished at what I was seeing, the feedback she was giving me. I'd never been tested like that. And I never realized that I'd gotten to the state that I'd got, that I was able to do these things. It was just eye-opening. It was glorious, actually, for me. So Stephanie presented to me, she had narrowed these 3 things down. Oh, and Tom was in a coma, and he was in the whole time, the 8 months, he went into septic shock 7 times, which is just unbelievable. Stephanie brought to me, and she said, I've got 3 ways we could go. And she said, I'll tell you them. And she told me the first one, and she said, the first one is phages. And as soon as she said phages, I said, that's the one, that's the right one. And she said, well, let me tell you about the other 2. And I said, but this is the one. And, she said, let me tell you about the other 2. And I said, okay. And she told me about the other 2. And I said, the first one you mentioned is the one. And she said, why? Why did you see that one? And I said, because the phages attack the superbug like a Pac-Man, and it eats it and kills it. And she said, that's what it does. That's what it does. And I said, yeah, okay. That, and I didn't know that before, but that was the reason I chose that one. And on that, what I said, and 25 other scientists on what I just said, she made her decision to go for phages for the treatment. A human being had never been injected with phages ever before, Tom. And phages are harvested from sewer water, and phages are excrement. And during the 1930s, 20s and 30s in Russia, there were experiments done injecting fresh stool into humans that are having a bowel or a colon or that type of organ illness. And the concept was the good bacteria will kill bad bacteria. That was the concept. And they were getting quite successful. And then penicillin was invented. And so people had the option of taking a turd or having a pill. Most people went for the pill, and they weren't doing the turd experiments anymore. And then since all the superbugs have been coming around many different places, I've been doing deep research. She decided on giving Tom the phages. And Tom was about 5 hours from death when he was injected with the phages. He was the first person ever to be injected. And everybody was afraid it would kill him. And he was injected. He was in a coma still. And within a few minutes, his vital signs got stronger. So they gave him another needle because they'd never, they didn't know what to do. They gave him another needle of it, and he got stronger again. Throughout the night, had several injections, and he got stronger and stronger and stronger. And the next morning, when Stephanie went to the hospital to see him, she went over to his bed and she, put her hand on his hand, and he opened his eyes, and he looked at her, and he came out of his coma, looked in her eyes, recognized her, and then he closed his eyes and fell asleep. But he never went back into the coma again. And Tom was the first person ever to be treated with phages. And it changed the way the world treats some superbugs. It changes the way medicine treats certain illnesses. And while we were going through all that, I started seeing what was going on in the future for this type of treatment. So instead of a cancer patient, this hasn't been done yet, but it's going to be, instead of a cancer patient being given chemo, they're treated with a different organism that will go after the cancer and eat it and kill it. And then what happens is they have their fill, and then they have like a big feast, and everybody gets drunk and stoned or something. And then when the superbug dies, so does the phages, and life goes on. And that's the story of the book. The book is called The Perfect Predator. I mentioned in the book 26 times. Ooh. And
Cece put a link in the comments for you.
Oh yes,
that book as well.
And that book was written from a scientific point of view, and a big part of what I did was eliminated from the book. And I was really pissed about that, but that's another story. But what happened though is that I was recognized 26 times in the scientific book. Mm-hmm. And it's a major step for my people, my type of people, my kind. Mm-hmm. And it opens the doors for the younger generation to do better work and greater work than I could have ever imagined. And it's just so glorious to have that, to be able to do that and give greater credence to my craft. It's very mm-hmm. special to do.
No, and thank you for that. That's like,
and I lived that for almost a year, feeling his energy, and he survived on my energy for almost a year. And it took me, it had a huge wear and tear on my body. And over a year, I went through really terrible times of PTSD episodes. My balance was thrown off. I had 3 major falls. I fell down the stairs carrying one of my a little dog, and I broke 4 ribs. And then, like a month later, I was chasing a dog, or maybe 2 months later, I was chasing a dog and tripped and fell and broke my shoulder. And all these kinds of things were happening to me, and I never realized why that could happen. But it was a direct result of my contact and tuning in with Tom.
Wow. So strange. Have you
had
a paranormal or UFO experience? Because we spent a lot of time in that spectrum. What about these?
Yeah, I haven't consciously, or to my awareness, encountered any UFOs or UFOs experiences. I believe that there are UFOs. It hasn't been anything that I've really been interested in. My commitment is in this field, giving service. So I'm good at doing this, and that's how pretty much I focus on. But I do know that there are UFOs, and I do know that they've been here, and I believe that. In terms of paranormal, when I think of hauntings and things like that, again, I believe in them. Again, I know that they're there. My purpose is to give service to living beings, ones that are on the planet right now, and that'll be animals too, besides just humans, but looking after animals, and that's where I shine, and it's that part of the phenomenon, as it were, that I've become an expert in, is tuning into people. That's and I've never really had time to do anything else, although I believe in it. I just
No, I understand. It's just that we cover all spectrums too. So normally we go all through the spectrums, but we spent a really good solid time on just the one, which is good, which we don't often do.
No,
the definition of paranormal is simply not something that is not normal.
Right.
So would you accept or not accept the possibility that this psychic phenomenon is paranormal by definition?
Oh, sure, it could be. Of course. It's not.
Are there any negative effects to being psychic?
There could be behavioral effects. When as you noticed throughout your time with your podcast, that people that do this work often have really traumatic backgrounds. We often have been abused. Most people that do this work, not 100%, but almost all, are empaths. We're empathic. We sense, we feel, and we give, and people that do this work often give more than what we get back. It's just what we do. When we become traumatized at a young age, on a spiritual level, on an unconscious level, the child that gets abused, was born into that family, makes a choice, and they go in the direction of become a narcissist, or they go in the direction of become an empath. And an empath is someone that connects and tunes into people and feels and want to help. And because we empathize with the injuries, narcissists don't give a shit. They're just only into taking care of themselves. So there's a choice of as we're forming. of going in the direction of the narcissist or going in the direction of the empath. And so there is most people that do this work, our instinct is, what can I do first rather than what I can get? Well, what can go wrong with that? Like, what you do is you can work your ass off and get nothing for it. Not that that's ever happened to me, but that is what can happen. Of course it happens. So our instinct is, what can I do rather than what can I get? And that's I think that's a very special trait that most of us have. Is
it, like, remove the psychic element from it, just looking at personalities in general, that narcissistic tendencies and stuff like that too. Is it possible for someone to exhibit both because they're not quite sure whether,
absolutely, well,
what's happening to them? Maybe are they fighting a psychic ability, or you know what I mean?
Okay. So when you're a narcissist, you're a narcissist. That's it. You're not going to change that. That's not a curable behavior. It's not curable. Just as an empath is not changeable. You are that. So what you are. You can't change whether you're a narcissistic, and you can't change whether you're an empath. That is what you are. It's you can pretend and put on a show, and narcissists do that. They can play the role, but when it comes down to it, the people they are involved with get screwed. The narcissist seldom gets screwed. The people that are empaths are constantly giving and not looking to get back most of the time. So it's not changeable. You have it or you don't.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get two sides of the spectrum, and on all that other two. It's just, I'm just trying to understand if it's possible for an empath, someone who cares so deeply and feels, to get worked up to the point to exhibit the other side.
Okay,
so these are like kind of set ways and personalities, but I think and then can a narcissistic person all of a sudden succumb to loving and healing? You say it's impossible to cure, but are there moments in their life where they could be empathetic and
yes. However, it would be for their own purpose.
Okay.
It wouldn't be for anyone else's. It would be for their benefit. Whereas the empath doesn't necessarily think about that. Okay, that's just the way the brain's wired. That's just the way it happens. I've worked. I had at least one parent that was one of those. I
just hear, Canadians and Americans. Canadians are empathic, and Americans might be narcissistic.
Hey, folks, that was Ryan who said that. Just in case, I'm just doing a.
I'm still on a buzz here about recent affairs, but
the thing is that it's what we're formed to be. So that's like saying, I'm a man. No, I'm not getting into that one. I've got dark hair, therefore, and it's not going to change other than get gray. I'm not going to grow red hair when I have dark hair like this. It's just not going to happen. I'll get gray hair, but okay. So it's narcissists becoming empathic. They would understand the concept logically. They wouldn't understand it emotionally. Whereas empaths on other ways, and one, and in the overall scheme of things, and I believe that what we are one way, we're equally the opposite. So, and your thinking is maybe there are somewhere in between. Yeah, maybe. But
I'm just looking for hope. I've experienced a lot of aggressive behavior recently, and I'm just wondering.
I'm sorry to hear that.
If it's possible,
or emotionally.
Oh no, it's just a gong show, but I'm just looking for hope for these people,
So the best thing you can do is live your life, be the best person you can be, and do the right thing to what you believe is, and let the rest of the people sort themselves out.
Dave Petrella popped in and says he doesn't agree with that. He says we can always change. I think that was referring to the previous thing we were mentioning.
Yeah. Well, what's the guy's name?
Dave Petrella.
Yeah. Well, you can change too and stop breathing. You can change, but if you don't breathe, you're dead. But you can still do it. You know, argue with a psychiatrist or a scientist about it. Don't argue with me about it.
Okay, so we're gonna do our final segment here. It's called I think you'll appreciate this. It's called Sorry Not Sorry, which is my Canadian kind of way of reminding people. And I'll explain it when we get back here. All right, so this is the purpose of this segment here is it's a social experiment.
Yeah.
I do this. I started this recently, so this is be the 5th time since this is episode number 5. It's very controversial and people just hate it, but I like to do it because because I just I get a variance here. So I'm going to ask you one question.
Okay.
And I'm going to time how long it takes you to answer it, and then I'm going to kind of explain from there. So do you accept the challenge?
Sure.
Okay. So with all the knowledge that you have in the world and your experience, what shape is the Earth?
Round.
Okay. 5 seconds. I'm just so the reason why I'm asking that is because and you're not really a man of faith, so we didn't really get into to the Bible too much. But in the communities that I'm with, a lot of people reference the Bible to validate and verify the existence of UFO and extraterrestrials and paranormal activity. However, so do the flat Earth communities that use evidence from the Bible to support that the Earth may be flat instead of round. And my second question would be, who would be right and who would be wrong?
From whoever's perspective, who's ever looking at it is the one that's right. So the person that sees the flat Earth, they're correct. The person that sees a round Earth, they're correct. And they're both right.
And then how come there's a divide? Why can't we agree that it's one shape?
Well, that's a good thing. Well, because no one has the same point of view as you do. Stand where you're standing. If I were standing right beside you, shoulder to shoulder, and apparently we were looking in the same direction, we would still have a different point of view. So in that way of seeing it or thinking, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. We're seeing it from our perspective. The reason I hesitated and it took 5 seconds is I was wondering why you were asking that question, and I was worried about the answer. Am I going to get into trouble over that? That's why it took 5 seconds.
That's okay. Hey, I'm not judging. That's why
it took.
Some people took
my ass.
Somebody took 11 seconds. That's the record.
Kidding, eh?
11 seconds, and some person answered it in 2. That's the lowest. I mean, it's if you have to think about it. If I explain it a little bit, it's just kind of getting an idea of whether how long the average person thinks about it. So what are you thinking about? Like if you're thinking about the consequences.
That's exactly what it was.
But then the person with 11 seconds was probably going back and forth thinking like, you know what? I don't really know. What should I say? Because I don't believe either or.
Right.
And then, so the point of that, again, is there's communities, right? So we have, and I mentioned Americans and Canadians tonight and things like that. I love all people, and don't quote me on all this stuff. It's just fresh and recent, but there are these divides, and when whether you believe the Earth is flat or the Earth is round, they fight with each other because it's a difference of opinion. But there's not enough evidence to conclude either or. Like if you either believe in NASA or you don't, and all these other things. And same thing with ufology and paranormal. Like, science tells you it doesn't exist, and then you experience it and you say it does exist. But yet we're continuously fighting with each other with the difference of opinions. So, why do you, I guess to come back to, I think I know what you were saying, bring it back to the human behavior. But do you ever think we could ever get along on beliefs? Is there a universal belief on why things are the way that they are?
Probably not.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is everybody that's on this planet is on this planet for the purpose of their own spiritual evolution. And in over time, we will experience all things on all levels, because that's the purpose of life. So the purpose of life is to see all things on all levels. And the only rule with that is what we do one way, we must do equally the opposite. So if we do this, we have to experience the opposite to it. That's the purpose of our existence. And we have multiple existences that we have the experiences. We have multiple existences because you can't see all things on all levels in one lifetime. In coming back to the debate of, is the world round, is it flat? Most of those things I don't really care so much about. What I'm interested in is helping the person get through whatever they're going through at that point in time. And it's not a spiritual or a sociological debate. I help that person get through what they're going through. Now,
I appreciate that.
Yeah. I just wanted to, talk about something else.
Sure.
In my podcast, it's called My Side of the Crystal Ball. And I started it because I saw how amazingly my field has grown in the time that I first started over 57 years ago. And I do a talk on my podcast. It's called WWRS, What Would Robert Say? And on one of the WWRS, I talked about hating the sin, loving the sinner. And how can you love somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer, that killed people and ate them? Like how could you love somebody like that? Well, at that level, looking at them at that level and the horrible things that they did, it would be hard. But we all come from God, from the Creator, and we all joined like that. And we all have a mission to experience in life. If you think of like a traveling actors ensemble where they go from town to town and playing a different play in each town. Well, the actors that are on stage when they have their grease paint on and their costumes and things like that, they take on a whole different persona, and they live that role. When the play's over and they go back to the train or the bus, what happens is the paint comes off, the costumes come off, and then they come back to the person that they really are. And that's why we can love the sin or hate the sin and love the sinner, because we're all coming from the same source and we all know each other. We're just having that experience together. So that's how you can love the sinner. And my big thing these days is being kind and being kind to people you don't like.
So yeah, and that's tough. That's the Canadian way, though.
Is that what it is?
I think so. Yeah.
I was on this podcast. I used an F-bomb. I also said my dog barfed on the floor, and they said typical Canadian. Everybody laughed. So I don't know what our reputation is, though.
So is your podcast pre-recorded or live? Like how?
It's pre-recorded.
Okay, so how often? When
it's a 2 week episode? And I've got an episode coming up on this coming Wednesday, and it's the 13th. It's the 13th episode, and I never imagined ever in my a million years that I'd be doing my own podcast, or at this time in my 70s, coming into a peak that I'm in. It's just glorious to do this at this time.
That's good. That's great.
It's fabulous, actually. Yeah.
So you also have a website.
It is there. It is right
there's
there.
Your website here. You want to show anything here to let? So it's Robert Lindsy.
There's Robert Lindsy Milne, and you can contact me. I'll just say something about the testimonials. When I'm asked for the testimonials from people, I just asked everybody I knew, and when people sent their testimonials in, I didn't look at them. I didn't read them. And when I sent them all to the web designer, I said, don't change a word, don't change a letter. Even if there are spelling mistakes, don't change them. The only thing you're allowed to change are the fonts. Other than that, put everything in, put everything in the podcast, good, bad, or indifferent, put everything in and don't change it. And nothing has been changed on my podcast. And I cried when I read them.
Perfect. For some reason, there's a color issue with my second screen here. Can you?
I see it very clearly. It looks good to me.
Oh, it looks fine to you?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
It's the right colors?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I'm looking at the screen right now, it's showing me it's a different color. Okay. I was just worried about
services,
that.
Testimonial. There's booking an appointment, news, services.
So you can find the podcast
right
if you
there.
go to the website, right? Yeah, that'll bring you there.
And there is some there. That's there. That's on there. And then under media, there are some shows under the media version on my podcast or on my website. I mean, here we go. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see there, that one, a scientist and a psychic help to save a man's life. Tom and Stephanie came on Gary Cacciolello's podcast with me, and they talked about my role specifically in helping Tom live. That one. Yeah, that podcast. That's an interesting one. And Gary, he introduced, Tom and Stephanie and I introduced us, and then he just shut up and the three of us talked through the whole show, talking about what happened with Tom and what he experienced. And that's the book there. Okay. Yeah, that's the episode. And there should be a picture of a book. There it is.
I know. There you go.
Yeah.
Cool.
And that kind of made me do my come out of semi-retirement. Now, remember, I never stopped doing readings. I just stopped touring, and I just stopped doing shows. I was on the Deanie Petty show on City Line for 5 years, once a month for 5 years. And then when Deanie went over had a CTV national show, I was on there for another couple of years. And I've had regular gigs like that all over the world.
Okay, so you can book a reading here. It looks like on your website here.
That's right.
So just click book a reading, and
this is incredible. All this technology here. Wow.
Yeah, no, I thought I'd do this for you because I remember when I asked if you want anything on the screen, you said you've never experienced that before. So I prepped. I just wanted to show you.
Way to go! Thank you for showing me that. That's great.
No worries. So if anyone's using StreamYard or any stream in the future, they should have something like that on the as things there. So that's it. So head over to Robert Lindsy Milne. So his last name, actually Lindsay spelled different
weirdly,
too,
isn't it? Lindsy. There's a story to that one too.
Okay, what's the story there?
Oh, okay, so anyway, I come from this very, very dysfunctional background, and on my dad's side, he hated his in-laws, and the in-laws hated him. And my grandfather, his name was Lindsay Williamson. He died before I was born, and after that, everybody on that side, every male on that side of the family, after he died, was named first name Lindsay or middle name. And my dad and my mom and the family got into a big argument about whether I should be called Lindsay. My dad lost. And when he went down to register my birth, he decided that he wasn't going to He was going to just screw them anyway. So instead of spelling it Lindsay, he just spelled it Lindsy, and it was him giving the finger.
Oh, wow.
Now, curiously, numerologically, Lindsay works out to an 8 with Robert Lindsy Milne together, works out to an 8. And that's business, finance. And, the Chinese people love the number 8 because it represents wealth and material financial success. Lindsy, no A or E, works out to a 7. And 7 is a life of giving service. So just that one number.
That marked you for life.
Yes. That's right.
So strange.
Isn't that amazing? Well, and there's probably a bunch of other things, but that one difference was what that would focus my energy on giving service rather than making money.
That's amazing.
Isn't that cool?
That's it. And we made it.
That's right. We did. Yeah.
We made it.
Worried.
That's okay. It's all good. And we made it. So thank you so much for being here. We're at the time. And so tell everybody where they can find you.
You can find me on my website, www.robertlindsaymilne.com. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And interesting Facebook page. And it's all about kindness. And it's on my profile. And you can tell when I made my comeback because like 2 years ago, everything on my Facebook page was about my dog training, dog handling. And then all of a sudden it's all about being psychic, going on shows again and doing kind and spiritual things for people. And, like one day it's all about dog training. And the next day in the last 2 years has all been about being psychic and back on the road, as it were. Once again, back in the saddle,
That's great. And you referenced your age now, 72, and you're still got full of spirit, full of energy, and you're not giving up anytime soon.
That's not true. That's true. That's right. So my dad died at 92, and he died last August. And when he stopped working, was during our lockdown in Ontario in March of 2020. And it was the first time in my dad's life that he could not go to work. And I would come out and visit him every week, and he'd say, I just got to find a job. I just can't live like this. And in that 2 year and a half period, I watched my father go from a really dynamic, active 92-year-old who worked as a cashier at a car wash just because he wanted to work. I watched him fade away when he no longer had a purpose to work, or no longer had a purpose. I watched him just fade away and die. And I'll be like that.
Well, I don't have any comment for that.
So I'll be doing this until I can't do it anymore. And then when I can't do it anymore, I've completed my life's purpose.
That's good. Well, thank you for your life of service as well, because you're helping a lot of people. So thank you so much. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I will be starting Uncharted Case Files again on Monday. So we'll see you at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday. Have a good weekend, everybody. And stay classy. Heed the world. And have a good day. Bye. That's it, everybody. That is a wrap. That is the end of it all. Thank you for joining me tonight. I will